I woke this morning to not the pitter patter, but the downpour of rain. And our climate is pretty deserty, but it was just that downpour. I did not want to get up. I want to just lay there and listen to that glorious sound. Yet for you, because I'm kind of cabinish, I'm going to say cabinish. You live in a goddamn cabin. Um, but the snow doesn't make any noise because it's so quiet.
Well, you know, one, I I actually was when I get weather alerts for different cities, and Santa Barbara is one of them.
Oh,
And
thank you.
and I actually woke up to coastal flood warnings in Santa
Yeah.
Barbara.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about you, and I know exactly what you're talking about, that heavy rain where it's just like all you want to do is like curl up under a warm blanket, and if your sweetie is next to you, then just curl up and hang for a bit. So I totally get that.
I think that's why there are various radio stations or tapes you can get that are babbling brooks, waves, rainfall. What is it about the soothing sound of water in so many various environments that lulls us off?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure. And, but it does, and it does. The other thing that you said just a little bit ago is that you're aware that snow doesn't make sound.
Well, I
And
thought
that's,
I've never I won't say never, but I could say maybe one time I was woke up to snow, but don't remember it.
well, here's an amazing thing. When snow is falling, and most people, will think of blizzards and wind and stuff like that, which oftentimes does happen. Um, when snow is falling and it's falling, a heavy snow, meaning a lot. Um, if it's not windy and you allow yourself to sit out there or just stop, you can hear the snow hitting the ground or hear the
Mm,
snow hitting the uh, whatever snow there is already on the ground. And what's interesting is that it's just as soothing as the rain, which
mm,
is, but it's a different kind of soothing. It's
mm.
it's a it, there's a softness to it, and what would I say? What would be the descriptive word? A
Maybe it's
gentleness, a gentleness
the
to it.
the feathers in a down pillow falling all about you.
Yeah,
There you go. He's
very
Dewey
much so.
Freeman. I am Mark Sylvester. We are the Elder Council, and we're talking about weather because when we're recording this show, we've just had blizzard across the country. We're getting ready for another one. We're having the weather people have run out of superlatives to explain how cold it is, but it's cold and dangerous. And I'm glad I live in a beach town where coastal flooding is fine because I'm a good 150 feet up, and I'm not worried about that. But we've had our share of natural disasters.
Yeah.
Speaking of natural disasters,
Uh-oh.
that's a messed up segue. Um, I, I this week I was talking about I did another show about how do we find ourselves in our career? Did we back into the career, or there an opportunity came up to take a job? In your case, there was an external event that caused you to change careers. Um,
Mhm.
there's that. But I'm taking that same thinking as it relates to relationships. Do we
Mm.
plan, and I'm talking about our intimate relationship, the person that we live with, or our closest love. Did we do we back into those? Do we plan for those? Do they How does all that happen? That's kind of part A. And then part B is, how do you know that's the one?
That's a damn good question. I'm it,
Hence why theoretically we will have the answer to these questions, so the person listening can go, oh, good, I'll keep listening.
so my response is formulating. I guess I would. Do you have an initial response to that?
Well, in full disclosure, I'm on my fourth marriage. The door number one was 18 months. Door number two was 18 months. Door number three was 18 years. And now I'm enjoying my 21st year with Kimberly. And I expect another 20. I'm 70. So I fully expect another 20. And I, it just crossed my mind that in each case, I didn't, how, I'm going to try to get it this way. You know how we have a hunter gatherer gene in us? I think is reptilian, right? It goes way, way back in our DNA, the
Mm-hmm.
hunter gatherer. I think that applies to mates as much as it does to food.
Oh, okay.
Is that fair?
Well, I'm certainly following you. It's intriguing.
And so and for me, I'm not so good on my own. I can't say that I've been on my own for a period longer than, I guess if I did the math, maybe 3 or 4 months. I'm one who I want to be with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if that turned up the heat on the hunter gatherer because I was hungry, to stay with that metaphor for just a minute. And I've got to say that I never really had a plan. I'm looking for this kind of woman with this kind of like, I'm looking for a job. There's something that optimizes my skill set. I mean, I'm just being super analytical about this
Mm-hmm.
because it's a very emotional decision. But I'm curious, had I been a little more analytical, I'm looking for this, and this. I had some criteria. And I think in my case, I was just more opportunistic. There's a very cute waitress. I'm in the kitchen. There's a cute waitress. She said yes when I said, "Would you go out?" And there wasn't, probably working with her. I loved her energy and her spunk, but that spunk nearly killed me. That's why that was 18 months. And the second one was
Mm.
someone who would watch my kid, and from door number one, and said yes, and didn't know what I was getting into. So I'm just curious in your experience, because I've got to say, I didn't plan. And door number three, all I was looking for was peace and quiet. And what happened was I got almost flatline on passion and excitement. And that
You
was
got you got the
fine
you got the peace and quiet, but not the
until
rest.
I didn't, until that was like, I met someone who was energetic and exciting and intelligent and beautiful and all the things that I had been missing. So I'm just curious, do we pick or are we picked?
Well, for me, I think that's a little bit of both. Um, the piece that I'd look at on my relationships that failed had to do with me being needy and
Okay, guilty.
making choices out of that place. versus me creating an opening or connecting with somebody uh, just out of pure connection versus neediness. Um, and clearly, I mean, Kimberly and I knew each other for a number of years before there was any hint of being romantic before. um, and when that did happen, I was pretty surprised. I was going, whoa. And I was not looking for that on any level. Um, so even though you're saying, and I think, I mean, clearly there's a part of me that is going, yeah, I want a companion, I want a partner, I want a mate. um, where we're coming from, actually, oftentimes I think colors are choices. And a lot of people that I know come from a place of being needy or lonely or those kinds of things. And what that creates for them is the process of overlooking the foibles or the lack of connection that is there. I mean, what's an interesting thing to me is that every time I work with a couple, um, both people in that couple knew pretty early on what some of the issues would be, and most of the time they chose to ignore that.
Mm.
Um, the other thing that's really interesting to me is in looking for a partner or mate or whatever words you want to use, is that oftentimes those things that have attracted people to each other are the exact same things that cause issues later.
Give me an example of that.
So this is a true story. A number of years ago, I was working with a couple and said, what attracted you to each other? What brought you together? And the man said, well, my wife was bubbly, she was talkative, she uh, was sort of playful and attractive. And the woman said, well, he was quiet and strong and would listen to me and let me talk. And
I can kind of
essentially,
see, I can kind of guess where this is going, boss.
yeah, I'm pretty much. And then I said, so what are you here for? The guy basically said, well, she never is quiet, she doesn't listen to me, um, and she's never serious. And the woman said, well, he never talks. We never have, discussions or conversations, and he doesn't share his feelings. So um, a whole lot of what happens has to do with perception, has to do with uh, what we look at, what we overlook. And then I think another thing that is really interesting to me in this is that people, both men and women, tend to, when they want to be with someone, they tend to look at the things that aren't exactly what they're looking for. And they have an internal process of going, well, I can change that.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and that's not a great way to come in. Let me just put it that way. I mean, and interestingly enough, it's the same thing I think with friendships. If you know, Like when you and I first met, it was like, whoa, this dude on the other end of this call is amazing. But I don't think either one of us came into this and went, oh, well, this dude's amazing on the other end. And I'd really like to sort of change how the other person's interacting. That's not happening. I mean, we certainly have discovered differences in how we process things and how we think about certain things. And but what I've seen is those places that were different are cherished.
Hmm.
Like, um, and we help the other person build on those differences. And versus, I don't believe either of us have gone, oh, well, Dewey really should be this way, or Mark really should be this way. But I see that an awful lot in couples. It's like, well, yeah, when we first met, the dude only showered every third day, and now I can't stand how he smells. So,
So one of
um,
the things that's coming across to me, and it's thematic in our lives, and it's I would say that it is it's something that comes up a lot, and we will just we've shorthanded it down to we don't settle. So we don't settle. So it feels like what you're explaining. I think in past relationships, I settled for, hey, this
mm,
is what I got, and I'm going to settle for that thing that it inevitably causes friction because you can't settle for it any longer. It's causes friction, whatever that looks like. You've given several examples of that, and we're like that now where we on kind of anything in life because it feels like we have such we're very happy in all aspects of life and we and but because we make choices now and we say no, we're not going to go do that thing because if we did we'd be settling. We'd rather just keep going on. Let's not do that because it's settling. And in as I'm reflecting back on that thing that has you fall in love with someone and then that's the thing that blows up, that's super interesting. And I I what I'm curious about, because now in our 70s we know that I'm not going to change you, you're not going to change me, and in fact the things that are different are the things that are interesting. It's possibly something to learn from, something that makes you unique, and I can celebrate that. I can recognize it and go, yeah, that's if something annoyed me, I would say, God, that annoys me, and then you have a choice. We have a choice to how can I deal with it or not.
mhm.
But it doesn't. I'm curious though, for the 30 or 40, 50-year old who's listening right now, how do you recognize these things? How could they take what we're talking about and not call her back after that first date? Just go, God, all these things were good, and I shouldn't call her back.
Well, so much of this comes back to some stuff that you and I've talked about before, which is our gut level feelings and our
Mm,
intuition that
mm,
we know
mm,
with, I mean, and even going back to like our initial interaction, it was both of us have said we left going, this could be really good.
yeah.
And that's just as valid of an intuitive feeling as, oh, this is like, yeah, Yeah, there's like, 83% or something is good, but there's this other, it's like where people try to make somebody or something happen that's just not there. And um and there is a settling. I guess one of the pieces that I would really wonder about, and I like that term that you brought up. I don't know that I've looked at it quite that way, but it's like, how many of us have been taught to settle, whether it be vocation, career, spiritual process, physically, you know, attractiveness to somebody, asking for certain kinds of things in relationships. I mean, all of those things. How many of us have been taught it's like that life is really about settling, that you don't really deserve it?
Okay, that you put a little tag on that one, doctor, that you don't really deserve it. So I can't, I have a hard time with that because that doesn't go through my brain in terms of I don't deserve that thing. But I do have the settling. So there may be some people who like, oh yeah, that they feel that like she's too pretty, she's too smart, I don't deserve that. I don't have
Right.
that, but I'm curious.
Well, if we settle for something, we oftentimes do that because we don't feel like we deserve something different.
Or I'm going to yes and you,
Perfect.
or it, it's it's good enough for right now.
Okay. So a little bit different perspective that comes
Yeah,
in.
like this is good enough for right now, and it's not perfect. And I can, whatever the thing is that makes it not perfect, I'm okay with that. I can choose to be okay with that.
Right.
And it's that discernment, and you have to know yourself. For instance, with me, there's a thing. If someone's got an odd laugh, I'm out. I'm out because I'm live a life of laughter, and I'm going to hear that laugh a lot, and it's going to bug the fuck out of me. And it's one of those. It's funny how and that's like some people are going, Sylvester, are you crazy? It's just the laugh, but hey, I laugh a lot. There's a lot of laughter in our house. I've told Kimberly, one of my favorite things in life is to watch her laugh. I can't,
Wow.
there just isn't anything, seriously, anything better than when we're doing a show and I look over and she's just tickled and she's smiling that megawatt smile and laughing and fully enjoying herself in the moment. But there's literally nothing better for me. So I think you know the things that you like, and probably those are the things that attract you. So
Mhm.
I want to get back to this discernment piece, because I think, I don't know, I'm not a rear view mirror guy, you know that. So I don't look back and say, gee, would I have done something different? Because there was something that major, that good that came out of each of those bad situations that I would not want to not have. But the purpose of this show is to help give men some tools so that they can, don't follow, with their impulses, but to be a little more discerning.
So with that, say a little bit more about that, because I'm not 100% sure what you're thinking or where you're going.
Well, I think it gets back to not settling and having some standards. I didn't know about a martial way of life until I was 50. Courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. And had I been introduced to those concepts when I was 20, courtesy number one, I would have noticed that someone was not courteous all the time. That would have been a big red flag at the time. Integrity.
Right.
Gosh, I caught him, maybe not lying to me, but lying to someone else, which means that eventually they'll lie to me. Integrity, perseverance, they give up easily, that they don't hang in there, like they don't show some like ego strength. Self-control, like that one shows up. That's a big one. That's one of the ones I have. I work on that all the time. But if I see someone doesn't have self-control, that's a big one for me. And then indomitable spirit, that to me is the last one, the best one. Like I cannot be dominated, right? I am indomitable. And I think that speaks to having an ethos. And I don't think as young, I didn't have an ethos. I didn't have a belief system. I was a Christian early, but that didn't apply to relationships, if you will. So I wonder maybe what we've done is, as you asking these questions, it was lack of a strong ethos that was a guiding force in my life that I used to guide my own life, and I use as a filter for those that are in my inner circle.
I absolutely love what you just said. Right when I'd asked you, tell me a little bit more about what you mean, what clicked in my brain was a few minutes earlier, we had talked about, do we know ourselves?
Yeah.
That had come up. And what I'm liking about what you're saying is not only do we need to work toward really truly knowing ourselves and know who we are, but we, as part of that knowing, is a creation of an ethos that we follow.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting to me that you mentioned, like early on, that you identified yourself as Christian, and it was like, but that didn't apply to anything. And it's like, one of my questions for the men/people listening to this is, do you have a value system or a belief system? I would say belief system, not value system, that has been overlaid on you, that you have been told that this is how you're supposed to believe, that you actually don't really buy it, and you haven't really like torn it apart and gone, oh, well, this part fits, this part doesn't, this part maybe I need to explore it more, all of those kinds of things. Because that belief system is not the ethos that you're talking about.
Correct.
And because when there's a belief system, it's like, yeah, we have it, but we don't live it. If we have an ethos, we actually live it. And
yeah, very much so. Very much so.
That makes sense to you?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And
I didn't know there was such a thing as an ethos.
Exactly. Well, and many of the belief systems that get forced onto us are, we get told that that's it, so we don't have to do anything else. And if we actually do explore the concept of the 5 things that you were talking about, it's that we get chastised for that level of exploration.
And I'm thinking, I remember being at the initiation in Austin and listening to men talk about a strong mother or strong father, or domineering mother, or domineering father. and a household that brought generational beliefs onto you. This is how we're
Absolutely.
this family, and we live this way, and these are the things that guide us, and this is how we are, and this is how we do things. This is you're a Sullivan, and Sullivans always do this, and so you grow up in that.
Mhm.
The ethos and belief system is laid on you heavily
Yes.
or lightly or whatever. You bathe in that. I didn't have that, so I had a vacuum of that until I found Christianity and was in the Jesus movement, the all of that Jesus freak when I was 16, 17, 18, right? I got into all that and then had dissolution with all of that, but then kind of aimlessly didn't have a thing, didn't know that having a thing would be really great, which is why I encourage anyone who has young kids, get them into martial arts, because I
Mm.
think that's where it came to me. It was, up there in the front of the dojo, and we said that at the beginning, at the end, and could have been seen as indoctrination, but it was a willing, like, I couldn't argue with any one of those, and I wrote long essays about all of those. So those were adopted, not put on to me. And I think when you, at least in my experience, by adopting an ethos and choosing to be that way, and it was with Kimberly. I mean, we were both in that dojo. So from the very, very beginning of our relationship, that there was that for both of us and together. And she'll say to me, the only one that comes out to me, she says, that wasn't very courteous.
Mm.
And that's all she has to say, and is go, yeah, I won't do that again. You're right. You're right. Thank you. Right. So I would encourage people to figure out those five things. Those five are good ones:
Well,
courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit.
say them slowly one more time so that when people listen to this, they can write them down.
Courtesy,
Okay.
integrity,
Integrity,
perseverance,
perseverance,
self-control,
self-control.
and indomitable spirit.
I love those.
My daughter called me years ago complaining about work and just whining. And she's an adult, right? And I distinctly remember being in the car, and all I said is, "Oh, so this is what perseverance looks like." And because she trained in the same dojo with us, because she had been complaining that she wasn't
Mm.
challenged in her workouts, and Kimberly said, "Invite her to the dojo," and we did, and she ended up getting a black belt 3 years later. And then I said, "Oh, this is what perseverance looks like." She goes, "Dad, okay, you're right." Right. So it becomes a way when it's a shared ethos, it's magnified tenfold, I think, because now we have a shared language. And you and I have talked about the written rules and the unspoken rules. And so they kind of are rules for life, right? Aren't they? But they're
Hmm.
guidelines for life. And so there's the unspoken ones. Say the Sullivans never do that, right? Or we just know I'm never going to talk to Dad when he's like this. That's an unspoken rule. But the ones that are spoken that we talk about with us, it's like it must be challenging for other people who watch us, because we both believe in indomitable spirit to such a degree that we don't fear competition. We don't even think we're competing. We just, because we cannot be dominated, and we don't dominate, right?
Yes, exactly. What, so again, what you're saying, I'm totally loving what you're saying. There's a couple of pieces here that I want to point out. When you gave the example of when Kimberly says, well, that wasn't very
Courteous.
courteous.
You weren't courteous just now.
She's not telling you that you're a bad human being.
Correct.
She's talking about a behavior
Yeah.
that you did that was courteous or not courteous. And that's that's huge. The other piece that I really want to bring in too, and I'm sharing this for a general piece, but I'm also sharing it just because it helps me, is we spoke last week and it was below zero here then. Things actually deteriorated here. It got even colder.
Got way below zero.
Yeah, 18 below zero. And on Sunday morning, I woke up and the water was frozen. And I spent the day figuring out how to get it unfrozen, and I did get it unfrozen, thankfully. But I also spent the day doing that, as well as making sure my horses were okay. And I was up there literally every 3 or 4 hours, even in the middle of the night. And what I'm finding is that indomitable spirit that you're talking about is huge. It's huge. And they all do interweave and go together, but that piece is huge. And can we, as men, and I'm going to make this bigger, as people, because I do believe that it's not just men that can have indomitable spirit. It's everybody.
Correct. Absolutely.
But can we do that, and do that in a way that we dig as deep as we can dig? Because I have to tell you, at 18 below, at midnight, walking up the hill to my horses is not a fun thing to do. It was interesting, but I wasn't going, oh, this is fun. I mean, it was like, oh, this is survival. This is life and death.
Right.
I mean, had I slipped, had I gotten
sure
one of my horses, they were struggling, had they kicked me, like I'm on the side of a mountain where no one can see me, I literally would have frozen to death. Kimberly was out of town. So that's one piece, is how deep can you really dig? The other piece I want to really bring in here is, even though Kimberly was out of town, we would be interacting either through text or talking on the phone. She was in Florida visiting her family, and her father is struggling physically. She was so amazing at checking in and what can I do to help?
She was checking on her horses.
Yeah, she was checking on her horses. And even to the point to where we checked out, should she come home? But we chose not to do that for many reasons. But the fact that she had an indomitable spirit that helped support me was an amazing process, something that I have not had with other women. And then again, even more to her credit, when she got home, I mean, the place was a mess because all I was doing was trying to keep water running and keep it warm and keep the horses alive. Like, immediately she kicked in and like helped. And so when we're talking about those 5 aspects of ethos, that being a glue that holds you together in your relationship is a really big deal. And what's interesting about that, to me, is all of those parts, all of those aspects, none of them are talking about sex. None of them are talking about any of those kinds of things. But the romance, the sex, the sensuality, the laughter, all of those things come out of that, those five
Yeah.
aspects, you know? And, I know you're Kimberly. I love her laugh too. And one of the things that when my Kimberly is gone, the biggest thing I miss is her laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got a great laugh. And that her laugh actually soothes me.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so I'm not, what I really want to bring in here is it's not just what we do individually. It is what we do individually, but it's not just that. It's like, can you bring those five aspects of ethos into your relationship? And um, that's what keeps us together. Because I mean, Kimberly and I have our struggles here and there, just like everybody else. I mean, it's not like
Correct.
we're without those, but what we do have is all of what happens is within the boundaries of those five ideals.
I mentioned I use a term often now, and I forget that I just casually say it now, but it was heard by someone this week who stopped and said, "What? Say that again?" And I said, "Relationships are a team sport."
Yes.
And sport makes me think of game makes me think of gamification, makes me think of the 5 rules of gamification that you've opted in a relationship. We've opted in that there are clear rules, right? There's rules in a game, and there's kind of rules in a relationship, which we could say are the ethos. They're guiding, let's say, guiding principles. That there's a scoreboard, right? Do we know how we're doing? How are we doing in a game? And I know that there's a scoreboard in life, but I think if you're doing well, you're, on all the cylinders, you can kind of measure that stuff. That there's in a game, there's a leader. Like who's the leader of this? I think in a relationship that you're both leaders, that you're not, one person isn't the obvious leader or the other, because there's that you both lead when
Right.
you need to lead. And that you know what the fifth one is in gamification? Have fun. Have fun. Right.
Perfect.
On that, I think that we've
Perfect
left
place to wrap up.
our our listener, we've given them a lot today, and I hope that they consider this idea of an ethos and write that down. Don't have to take that one, but find one. Thank you, my
Yes,
friend.
exactly. Thank you, sir.